the kingdom of Israel, a land of milk and honey, but also a land divided. On one side stood King Ahab, ruler of Israel, on the other a powerful prophet named Elijah. Their conflict, the worship of God versus the worship of Baal. Ahab's wife Jezebel was a fierce and formidable woman. She worshipped Baal, the Canaanite god. Jezebel was determined to spread Baal worship throughout Israel. She had no tolerance for dissent. Elijah was a man of unwavering faith. He worshipped the God of Israel, Yahweh. Elijah was a powerful prophet, known for his miracles and his boldness in confronting evil. He saw the danger in Jezebel's influence. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. Two powerful figures locked in a battle for the soul of a nation. Their conflict would have far-reaching consequences. The worship of Baal was seductive. It promised prosperity and fertility. Jezebel used her power to promote Baal worship. She built temples and appointed priests. The people, swayed by her influence, began to abandon Yahweh. Elijah saw this as a betrayal of God. He knew that Yahweh was the one true God. He challenged Ahab and Jezebel. He warned them of God's anger. He called for repentance. Jezebel, enraged by Elijah's defiance, vowed to destroy him. She ordered the deaths of Yahweh's prophets. She forced Elijah into hiding. The conflict escalated, fueled by religious fervor and personal animosity. The kingdom was torn, families were divided, the land suffered under a spiritual drought. The clash between Elijah and Jezebel was a microcosm of a larger battle between good and evil. Elijah, guided by God, emerged from hiding. He challenged the prophets of Baal to a contest. The goal, to prove whose God was the true God. The location, Mount Carmel. Ahab and Jezebel agreed. They assembled the people and the prophets of Baal. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. This was not just a contest of gods, it was a contest for the hearts and minds of the Israelites. Elijah addressed the crowd. He mocked the prophets of Baal. He challenged them to call upon their God to send fire from heaven. The prophets of Baal, desperate to prove their power, accepted the challenge. Elijah watched with quiet confidence. He knew that Yahweh would not be mocked. The stage was set for a dramatic display of divine power. The prophets of Baal prepared their altar. They chanted and danced. They cried out to their God. But there was no response, no fire, no voice, only silence. Elijah mocked them further. He told them to shout louder. Maybe their God was sleeping. Maybe he was on a journey. The crowd began to murmur. Doubts crept in. The prophets of Baal grew increasingly frantic. As the day wore on, the prophets of Baal grew desperate. They cut themselves with knives. They cried out in frenzy. Still there was no answer. Their God remained silent. Their humiliation was complete. Elijah, his moment arrived, stepped forward. He rebuilt the altar of Yahweh. He prepared the sacrifice. Then he prayed. A hush fell over the crowd. They sensed that something extraordinary was about to happen. Section 5. The wrath of Jezebel. A queen scorned and a prophet hunted. A pillar of fire descended from the sky. It consumed the sacrifice. It licked the altar. The crowd gasped. The power of Yahweh was undeniable. The prophets of Baal were defeated. Elijah, empowered by God's victory, ordered the people to seize the prophets of Baal. They were taken to the Kishon River and executed. The worship of Baal suffered a crushing blow. Yahweh was vindicated. Jezebel, furious at the defeat of her God and the execution of her prophets, swore revenge on Elijah. She sent him a message. May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Elijah, despite his victory, was afraid. He knew the reach of Jezebel's power. He knew she was capable of carrying out her threat. He fled for his life. The prophet who had faced down the prophets of Baal was now running from a vengeful queen. Section 6. Fear and Flight. Elijah's desperation in the wilderness. Elijah fled into the wilderness. He journeyed for days. He was exhausted, hungry, and afraid. He had faced down kings and prophets. But Jezebel's wrath terrified him. He collapsed under a broom tree. He prayed for death. He had had enough. He felt alone, abandoned. Where was God in his moment of need? Had all his sacrifices been in vain? An angel appeared to him. The angel touched him gently. He gave him food and water. He told him to rest. God had not abandoned him. He was not alone. Elijah ate and drank. He slept. He awoke, strengthened and renewed. He was ready to continue his journey. He knew that God was with him. He would not face Jezebel alone. Section 7. A whisper of hope, God's reassurance, and Elijah's return. Elijah traveled to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. He sought refuge in a cave. He waited for God to speak to him. He needed guidance. He needed reassurance. God spoke to Elijah, not in a mighty wind, nor in an earthquake, nor in fire, but in a still, small voice. God asked Elijah, "What are you doing here?" Elijah poured out his heart. He spoke of his fear, his loneliness, his despair. God comforted Elijah. He reminded him that he was not alone. He gave him new instructions. He told him to anoint a new king and a new prophet. God had a plan. Elijah was still part of it. Elijah left the cave transformed. He was no longer afraid. He was filled with a new sense of purpose. He had encountered God in the wilderness. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Section 8. The Legacy of Defiance, Jezebel's End and Elijah's Triumph. Elijah, following God's instructions, anointed Elisha as his successor. He continued to prophesy against Ahab and Jezebel. He warned them of God's judgment. He remained a thorn in their side. Jezebel's reign of terror eventually came to an end. She died a violent death, just as Elijah had prophesied. Her death was a fulfillment of God's judgment. It was a vindication of Elijah's faithfulness. Elijah, his mission accomplished, was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. He left behind a legacy of courage, faith, and unwavering obedience to God. He had challenged a king, confronted a queen, and stood up for what he believed in. The story of Elijah and Jezebel did not end with their deaths. Their conflict had a lasting impact on the kingdom of Israel. It served as a reminder of the consequences of idolatry and the power of faith. Section 9. Echoes through time. The enduring significance of their story. The story of Elijah and Jezebel continues to resonate today. It teaches us about the dangers of religious syncretism. It highlights the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of opposition. Elijah's courage inspires us to be bold in our faith. His willingness to confront evil challenges us to do the same. His story reminds us that God can use ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. Jezebel's story serves as a cautionary tale. It shows us the destructive power of unchecked ambition and religious fanaticism. It reminds us that true power lies in humility and obedience to God. The epic showdown between Jezebel and Prophet Elijah is more than just an ancient story. It is a timeless reminder of the battle between good and evil, faith and idolatry, courage and compromise. It is a story that continues to challenge and inspire us today.